Hey, I am trying to deal with one more decision I have to make, one after 1.5 million that I've had to make this last couple of weeks, and one of the 1.2 billion that I've had to make in a camper build process here. And
That's right. Building an expedition camper involves a lot of decisions, a lot of micro decisions and big decisions every single day. And so even though I had planned this camper out from every detail from the very beginning, I still have a lot of little details to keep figuring out as I install this CruiseNComfort 24 volt split system 3-component air conditioner, which I'm so excited to get operational.
I have my air conditioning compressor from CruiseNComfort right here. And this is where I plan to put it right here. And so what's going to happen is the refrigerant lines will come up here, they'll go in here, they'll come up to where the evaporator is going to be right up here. There's going to be a little chase where they're going to, the refrigerant lines will come up through, and electrical is all going to be right in here, so it's going to be really easy to get over to this for wiring. However, well, let's just talk to this. If it's right here, it's kind of pretty good. The bench is actually going to be about this height, and so it's embedded within the bench. These will be storage cabinets down here. So not really in the way at all. Be nice and quiet. It has good ventilation because there's going to be some venting at the top of the bench and the back against the wall here. However, I keep coming back to, gosh, it looks like it just fits so nicely right here. And I can move this accumulator to over here, over here. I can move it down into here, in between here, which is like what I'm going to do. And if I put it here, though, it would be below the sink, so the sink would be here, and I can make that plumbing and stuff work. But the downside is that all I'd have for really a drawer is a drawer of about this depth, call it roughly about 1 foot deep. And it could be this full width of the cabinet, which is pretty nice, just above these water filters where they are here. So these are my two options, compressor here or compressor here. And I've gone through many other iterations of compressor over there, compressor over here, and quite frankly, it's just like these are the best spots based on refrigerant line runs and where the condenser already is installed and where the evaporator basically has to go because of the way it's set up and its return air or intake air, and also where the refrigerant lines are and for the distribution, the supply out. So I think I'm going to keep it where it is, but God's driving me crazy, and it keeps me from moving forward in this project to finish up the benches, which I want to do, and I also want to move forward and finish up the bed, which I've almost completely forgot really what the heck I was doing over here. So I need to get back over there so I can remember what I was doing, because it's been like 2 months since I was working over in this, so it's time to get back at it. So I think I'm just going to go back over here, try to do what I can, come back to the compressor, but for the meantime, and here it is in this position. So it give me, yes, a short drawer right here. Shallow drawer is probably the better way of saying it. Still fairly short because only the sink in essence right above it. It would limit my sink depth, and the drain would probably have to go over to one side. This is tough. What to do? I don't like water being above it. That's the one downside. I don't like, let's say, raising the height from over here, but it's not like it's only going up a couple of inches. Slightly more efficient refrigerant line run, but without having the sink in, it does make that an issue because it's going to limit my sink options of what can fit beneath it. So I think I'm going to leave it over here because I don't want to limit my sink options and or limit my drawer space in case I need the more drawer space, even though it does fit so well here. And this really cute little dishwasher that I was planning on having right here that would just be a drawer that pulls out would fit beautifully right here, but it can still fit there or here even without the air compressor there and still get a little more drawer space. So I think that's the plan, is keep it over here like it's always been in the plan. It always makes the most sense. Just may not be as perfectly as efficient, but I think it's still the best way. So I'm going to go that way. It's going to change this up to 90 and figure out the rest of these fittings here so I can get that done, and then I can get the air conditioner compressor installed on a mat and a platform here and get it framed down. I was learning how to bolt it down and I couldn't really figure it out, but I see here that CruiseNComfort, all these are actually into threaded studs on the back of this plate here, not nuts. So I can just go ahead and tie into some of these as different around places to go ahead and bolt it down. So that's what my plan is. Other than kind of clamping it down with some compression of some other mounts and so forth, keeping it locked in, I'm just going to go ahead and bolt it down as well. All right, so I have the CruiseNComfort compressor installed, and this is how I did it. So it's roughly about 10 inches square. I bolted down a 1/4 inch high strength PVC 12-inch block. I just happened to have a 12-inch block that was handy, or square of it, and so it had bolted down. This high strength PVC is incredibly strong. It's practically indestructible. It will provide a little bit of vibration dampening, but not much. Generally, it's a pretty just solid platform, but it's nonetheless going to absorb a little bit of any vibration from this, but plenty strong to handle this pretty heavy unit and also being compressed down. What it did then is I went ahead and used some 3/8-inch foam. You can see the foam here around the edge. This is a very high density foam. It's really an insulative foam. Of course, it'll absorb sound dampening very well as the vibration incredibly well. I wasn't sure how to mount this because there's really no mounting holes around the sides. But you see what I did is there, use these 80/20 cornerback brackets with a slotted section on this side to remove the screw that is in these right here, this screw, remove it and reapply it. These screws go through a threaded insert into the pan of the CruiseNComfort compressor right here, and that holds down this case and bolts the whole thing down. And that threaded insert, these bolts are fortunately long enough that I can get them also through, plenty long, and so I could bolt in here. And the slides there, because they're a little bit lower down than what this 80/20 bracket will support in its normal hole. So the slot allows me to, of course, allow it to get compressed down really tightly here. And that's exactly what it is. And I then bolted these brackets down to my PVC, just drilling some holes in just to accommodate the bolts for these, and bolt them down with some flanged nuts underneath. On this side over here, I just bolted it directly into the framing right here. So you can see down here on this side, I have that bolted down into the actual framing, and also I have these holes that were drilled through in bolting and holding down the PVC platform as I go around this here. So this is in there incredibly solidly. The brackets are in there incredibly solidly. They can be removed. So if this ever needs to be changed out, it can be. See, it's absolutely solid. I'm actually rocking the camper, just pushing it back and forth without any visible notice on the actual compressor. I've got a little bit of just padded foam here. What I could fit was basically just like a 1/4-inch foam that's in there between this piece of cabinet frame and the compressor. There is actually a gap in there just to ensure that it's not rubbing at all on this piece here. I set it so it's not rubbing on any of the framing, and that way this thing should be able to vibrate and not hit the framing at all, and not transfer some of this vibration or noise into the framing here. It's nice and separated and isolated from that. I even went so far as that these bolts that are bolted in, they're actually a tad bit long, and that allows this PVC frame to just slightly float above the framing here, and so that's intentional, just allow it to slightly float above, so it's got a little bit of ability to vibrate itself and therefore absorb any vibration that does get transferred to it, and separate that really from the framing. And there's still obviously going to be some vibration, but very minimal, and it's locked in there, which is the key thing. And now my refrigerant lines are going to come up from here, can go right into and tie into these spots, and then they can go, the one going up to the evaporator will go right up there to where that's going to be up in this upper cabinet up here will be the evaporator unit. And of course these lines will come down through my through hole here and then out to the condenser, which is pretty much right underneath over here on this side. And I put that condenser over on this side over here, the condensing unit, because it's not near the exhaust, which runs under on this side, and so it's away from the exhaust, so I can use that while the vehicle's in motion to cool down the camper while the vehicle's in motion. I'll have the 300 amp alternator running off the engine so I can keep the camper nice and cool while in transit. So I get to a camp spot that's hot, I have the camper already nice and cool and comfortable temperature wise. That condenser won't be working harder, be running right next to drawing hot air in its exhaust, or after driving a while, parking and then running the AC unit, it's not going to be, of course, again right next to the exhaust, pulling that hot exhaust in. So there's a reason why I mounted over to the driver's side. It's also meant there's a lot of free airflow around it, and so it can really do its job well. The evaporator is going up in this unit because its intake is on this side of it and the outlet is on this side, and what I want to do is blow that through a duct all the way around through the bed area here, because that's where the area that's going to need it. It's high up. The duct will run up at the ceiling. It's high up. It'll then distribute that air up there. It'll keep the bed space cool, which is key. You want to make sure you can sleep comfortably. And then, of course, what finally dumps out over here at the final exit point of that supply duct, above the bench here, first one over here, and the rest are on the bed, it's now going to travel all the way back to the evaporator, which is over here, right? So it'll pull that air all the way back through. The bathroom's up front here. I don't need to cool down the bathroom. That probably I actually want to have a little bit on the warmer side. It's also near the entry door. I don't want to be having that cool air right at the entry door and letting that cool air out. I want to make sure I'm going to have a little separation between that and the bathroom door, so that becomes kind of a little entry vestibule airlock. So anyways, this is how I installed it. I can access easily the compressor hoses and also wiring, which my electrical system is right where I'm standing or sitting right here. So it's going to come up, the wires will come up and go right into here. And so it's a nice short run for the electrical. It's as short as a run for refrigerant lines. I actually ran tape measure for all my different places I could have put this compressor. And the evaporator really didn't have any other options. I want to keep the noise as far away from the bed as possible. Certainly the evaporator, what's running, and its fan, that's going to be the noisy part. The compressor is going to be underneath the bench in here. The bench height is actually up at around this height. This is, right about this height here, or right about this height actually. And so this will be under and within the bench. There'll be storage drawers that'll be around it. They'll have a shorter one in width or less wide and a shorter one in length right here. And I can take full advantage of this space. And so I can make sure I'm taking full advantage, but those storage drawers will have mostly clothes in them. So there'll also be a sound dampener. On top of the bench will be a sound dampener. The heat from this will have there'll be an air gap around the sides of this to let the heat out. And then also, so be a vent along the top of the bench here. There'll be about a 3-inch wide mesh vent all the way along top so the airflow can get out. And there'll be a mesh vent at the very bottom of the dinette platform here. That'll allow airflow essentially across the batteries and the electrical system up through into this bench and then out here. So there'll be nice passive convective cooling for that. So I think it's going to work really well. I'm excited to have that done. I'm not going to move forward on building out the bench. I have all of my framing and stuff over here. So I'm ready to get all this installed and finish out the bench install. And then I'm going to move on and hopefully try to complete the finish of the cabinet framing for the bed area. And then that allows me also to get the bed platform and dining room table in. The dining room table frame is actually already built over here. If I can get those built and in, and that'll finish up the benches in, and then I can start building out the upper cabinets over the kitchen and also over the bed area, and also the final one really in the bath area over here, which is a closet, also holds the toilet and shoe storage and some other things like that. And so I've got a lot to do, but let's get going on it. Air conditioning compressor mount, I actually took this T-frame and completely butted up right against my frame here for the air conditioner compressor. So even though this air conditioner compressor frame is bolted in 7 bolts and into 4 different pieces of aluminum framing, it's not going to move. But nonetheless, I can make sure I'm maximizing space. I can have a frame rail come right here for a cabinet. I still have got an air gap there, especially because the drawer is going to be set in from that at another 1/2 inch. Well, from this, it'll be 1 inch plus a 1/2 inch. So I'm really going to have a drawer out here, which is going to give about 2-inch air gap on this side. I've got an air gap on the back. I have an air gap on this side. So I know I've got my air gap. That's also compressor. I went through my mount. I actually have my instructions here. One of the things I find is a little tip to do is print out the instructions. I don't like to necessarily waste paper and ink cartridges, so I try to print as just when I need to. But in this case, because instructions are available online, instead of continuing back to go reference it online via my phone or something like that, which is obviously a little bit hard to see and everything else, and sometimes remember, keep going back to the reference and remember, I just sometimes print out the pertinent numbers I need, just print out a couple of pages. In this case, I had a few more pages than a couple, so I printed the whole manual out that I needed, and I just keep it with the devices. And so it's here with the device. I know what those dimensions are. I can continue to reference it as I'm doing the installation for this to make sure I got everything correct and right. And I go back and look and go, okay, wait, how big is that hose? Oh, that hose is 1 inch in outside diameter. Okay, and the other hose is 30 in outside diameter. Now that I've looked this a few times, I have it memorized. So I go, okay, I know I need a 2-inch hole to fit these hoses through. I can reference it and make sure I got my hose routing the right way. So that's just one little dimension here. One thing I did here to help lock this in, even though this platform here, this base that's bolted to, this very high strength PVC is not only bolted into 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of aluminum framing, so it cannot move. It is locked in solid. This piece is glued in, and this piece here is directly connected to a glued in piece. These two are floating over the tank, but of course tied in those same pieces. This piece here is also tied into this piece, which is glued in. So they're all solid, but not only do I have it mounted into 4 pieces, it's actually got 7 bolts all the way around that are bolted into this framing, so it cannot move. It is solidly in there. They are tight, they are down there, but now I also have it locked in. This piece of framing is locked in with this T bracket or connector, all the way butted up against that corner there. By being butted up against this corner here, now this piece can't move this way, so I now I've got that locked in. It also sets the exact dimension for this piece, and now I can set my cabinet framing slide. That's going to be a piece going across here, and that'll tie this piece and this piece solidly together. It'll create my slide mount for the small short drawer is going to be here, and the longer full length drawer that's going to be in here. So it'll be a slide mount for both, and that also now, because that piece will come across here with the slide half-inch gap over here, I'll have actually a 2-inch gap, roughly this, a little more than ½ inch plus an inch plus a ½ inch slide width, so I have a 2-inch gap between here, so I have a lot of good airflow, plus a bit of a gap at the back of the drawer, and of course over the top of the drawer for this hot air to exit out on that side. Plenty of air gap on this side. Over here on this side, this drawer is only going to come back to about here, right? So I'm going to have a big air gap. That way these hoses coming out with 90-degree connectors, the wiring coming in, everything else has got its space to be connected. But the bottom line is, like, it's just another way to absolutely make sure all this is secure. Again, I'm pushing on this and I'm rocking the camper. I'm not moving this at all. It is solidly in here. So the downside is whatever vibration it is going to go to this platform. The good news is this platform again is floating, and it's also got this rubber isolation on there. So the only thing I probably could have done to be one step above is put more of this rubber dampening pad. I could have put some underneath, and I did think about that, but put some underneath. I'm still got the bolts that are connected in here, so I still have a direct connection, and that's pretty hard to get rid of that. So I felt like it wasn't really going to do much. The high strength PVC will isolate some vibration, and it does not rub in here either. Even in this drawer slide here, I thought about it with intent, because this is the top of the air gaps here, so this is not blocking any of my air gaps. It's above that, but it's on the solid piece, so it also locks in the side. I'll put a little bit of foam insulation here, some really thin foam insulation, so it separates that from any vibration there. Even though I don't think that's going to move, I can't touch it moving it in any way. This is still not locked in. This will be locked in. Hopefully that helps.
And I do hope this video helps you with your cruise and comfort, air conditioning, insulation, or anything else that you're working on right now in your camper. And this is what the compressor looks like as it's been installed with the hoses just temporarily run. I have a bunch more coming up as far as modifying some of the camper box mounts, wrapping up some more of the plumbing, and also finally resolving the check engine light that's been on since I picked up this vehicle brand new from EarthCruiser, as well as starting the electrical installation. So I'm really glad to be sharing this with you, and hopefully all these help, and it's exciting to be getting this DIY expedition camper more completed. So thank you for watching, subscribing, and sharing with others.